So why don't we get started? We've got a half an hour here. And again, to be respectful of everyone's time, I'd like to start the conversation. Anyone who joins us, we'll welcome them as we can. So good evening and thank you, everyone. It's my name is Greg Furzados. It's truly an honor to gather with all of you here tonight as people of faith who share respect for all other faiths, and we know what good can come from interfaith learning experiences like this and community efforts, which I feel like this is really becoming, especially on this Earth Day, to understand the climate crisis problems that we're all faced with, and that I believe we're all here to strive in any way we can to repair. Now, I'd like to give you it's about a dozen slides, which I can just walk you through and give you my ideas. By the way, this is about plastics and the problem of plastics to our planet, to our environment, to our health. And after talking about that, I'd like to hear from you, and we'll maybe dive into basically the need for new strategies is how this is subtitled. Let me share my screen with you. Can everyone see that? Okay, great. Like I said, I can go through this, without too much delay, and then I'd love to just leave this open because it's a relatively decent, a small group of us, and I want this to be as interactive as possible, hopefully to learn as much from you as I've been able to do a little research on and share. Let's see. You can see this screen. I'm sorry. So I thought a good place to start was simply just to ask ourselves, plastics are a problem. We read it in the papers, right? Well, the next question, I suppose, what is our responsibility? And two quotes from people I'm sure we're relatively familiar with. If you hadn't read or heard much about it, in the last couple of years, Pope Francis, in his papal encyclical, the Laudato Si, said amongst a lot of other, really wonderful statements for a pope of the church, the Catholic Church, to say on a lot of other social justice issues, but one point on the environment, saying, "Never have we hurt and mistreated our common home as we have in the last 200 years. Reducing greenhouse gases requires honesty, courage, and responsibility. Those who will have to suffer the consequences will not forget this failure of conscience and responsibility," which really struck me in this age of new voices, young voices, Greta Thunberg and others. That really struck me, and I hope it did you too, as far as responsibility to the next generations of all human beings. Also, someone else I had the pleasure of meeting and seeing speak in person was the Dalai Lama, who at one point said, "With different kinds of factories and chemicals, we have a strong negative impact on the balance of nature. Based on a practical ethic of caring for our home, grounded in our understanding of interdependence, what kind of measures can we take to correct these imbalances in nature?" And for me, I guess the key word was interdependence. Again, a reminder that for many of us who believe, we can only do so much to help the environment or start fixing, repairing the problems that have been caused in the last centuries. Interdependence, you might not know what, how you might be hurting other people or the whole planet, but we're learning that we all are, in this together. So why are new strategies needed at all? From what I've seen, and I'd love to hear from you guys later. So far, things haven't worked. A lot of strategies have come up. But here really quickly is, some of the more recent statistics, and they're pretty easily found, Googled and whatnot. At least 355 million metric tons of plastic were produced by human beings. That has never decreased. It's still increasing on an annual basis. So we use a lot of plastic, even though we might try not to or be good recyclers. More than 40% of this is single-use consumer items, stuff we just use once and throw away. What happens to it then? Well, we're not sure. If it goes in the trash or gets recycled, what exactly happens? Millions of tons of things that we should be reminded, all synthetic fabric for our clothing, end up in dumpsters, in landfills, or burned, which is going to pollute not just the land and the oceans, but the air as well. So again, I don't have to tell a group like this, us self-selecting climate activists, that just making and using plastics is a direct cause of the climate change and yes, global warming. Right now, we're on our way to increasing the global temperature, in 9 years by 1.5 degrees Celsius, which a lot of places, the EPA and activist organizations around the world have seen this as a tipping point. Another 1.5 degrees Celsius and the concomitant rises in CO2 in the atmosphere just might, be much, much harder ever to repair. Again, so this plastic that we use, it's polluting everything, our oceans, our land, our air, and it's affecting our personal health as human beings as well. And I can just run through some of this stuff. This is all recorded, by the way, and I want everybody to have this and keep it and read this whenever you like. So just the creation of plastics, drilling for oil and gas. That's where we get it, just to make plastic from fossil fuels. And it's a pretty awful process. Creating things like polyethylene, one of the most popular plastics, which again go into more things than I think we need: food packaging, our water bottles, our clothing. Also, another gas, greenhouse gas, propane, can be used to create something called propylene, and that in turn polypropylene, which is something that we see and use everywhere. Food packaging, to cars, who knew? Now the effects, also I think we're all pretty clear, just to set the tone, the basis here. The excavation, transportation, refinement of oil and gas, the process is polluting the air. Even what they, some producers might call, clean natural gas, it's not clean. It's emitting tons of CO2 in the atmosphere. And these processes, more often than not, I guess the headlines from Brazil most recently, how many millions of acres of forest are taken away just for this. So the double whammy of not just creating this plastic and polluting the planet, but also removing the trees that we need to help us fight the battle, as well as other insidious things like fracking, which I think we're all getting tired of hearing about. So after it's produced, we use it and we throw it away. We try to recycle it, but exactly what happens to it there? The plastic waste, directly, indirectly, it's dumped in landfills. A lot of it, some way or another, ends up in the ocean. And we've seen the photos, I'm sure, in the news as of late, of just the amount of fish that it can kill, and add to the already scary, warming of our oceans. So at this point, by 2040, we will have doubled. Already is a pretty rough place to be in, but our plastic waste will have doubled if we don't make any changes by 2040. And again, the incineration of this, a lot of times in the creation of plastics, these things that wind up, let's say, in the oceans, in the fish that we eat, I think you've heard that, now quote me if, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody, but the average American, I think, ingests about a credit card's worth of plastic on, what is it, a daily or a weekly basis?
A week.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. So, all right, what can we do? I've got some ideas, and this is where I'd like to start like a conversation here. Let's do what we can now, is what I'd like to, posit to everybody here. We're consumers, American consumers, we use a lot of plastic. Let's at least try to hold to, creating new habits. Don't buy bottled water. Don't use anything but reusable cups. Don't use plastic forks and knives. When you go to the grocery store, you don't have to buy packaged vegetables and fruit. You can avoid all sorts of other, plastic things, the takeaway containers from your average, takeout restaurant and things like that. Stick to paper and cardboard rather than plastic whenever you can. Yes, carry your own reusable grocery bags. In this age of COVID, everyone's had to, we're washing our hands like crazy. That was too much plastic. A good old bar of soap kills just as many viruses and germs. Buying things in bulk. And again, being just good stewards of everything we do as food eaters. Glass jars rather than plastic whenever possible. Again, getting into the last 12 months, a lot of people have, been challenging their local restaurants and grocery stores. We don't need single-use plastic to keep our hands clean or anything like that. We can keep washing our hands. Let's support our local restaurants, the ones that we know are doing their best to avoid plastic, and speak up, speak out, support these restaurants, tell them they're doing a great job and you want to support them. It's a good time just to, cut down on our consumerism in general, if we can be thoughtful about this stuff. And when we go out locally, shopping locally can really, really help. Since the farm to table movement and everything, our local farmers, rather than something that, comes from another state or another country, just by simply shortening the supply chain, by its very definition, there's going to be less plastic packaging in the whole process. And again, I hope that these hand sanitizer things are just a short-term fad. And then, okay, besides being consumers, let's, I suggest it's time to get really, really active, and we can get political. There's no problem with this. Individually, question our candidates and find out where they stand on these issues. So local, statewide, national bans. There's something that a lot of people have kind of forgotten about, but investing in certain companies or not investing in other companies can, if more of us do it, make a difference. And in contacting all of our representatives, there's a lot of bills in DC and there's some in Springfield right now, which we can learn about, and call these people, call our representatives, make it a habit. And I hope they hear us. Other things, in the meantime, you do what we can, and then back to just simply, in the meantime, using as little plastic as you possibly can. And not just individually, right? Our faith communities, our churches and synagogues, our congregations, all of our houses of worship, with the strength of numbers, we can do things institutionally to cut down on plastic waste. We can give and attend meetings of and otherwise support these environmental advocacy nonprofits, which are doing a great job out there. And at the end of this, my last slide, I had a few names of some things, but we can discuss some organizations that I think I'd love to hear what you guys are all, might be active in. And this is something a lot of people just don't think about. And I tell to my younger friends, running for office is not a bad thing. I wish more people would actually consider it for a career or, a part-time job. when people who care get more involved, well, you know, things are going to happen faster. And so we're all doing what we can, right? As consumers, as good citizens, we're making our voices heard individually. We're doing what we can, and as a group, as a community. But we won't have to do as much recycling if we just, as they say, leave it in the ground. And that goes back to our personal habits. But the less of a market there is for this, the less harm we're going to do. So the oil and gas, less of it will be pumped out if we as a society just start using less and less plastic. And so then there's plastics right now. I guess it's going to be hard to think of life without automobiles, which I suppose still need to be made somehow, you know, some things out of plastic. There's a lot of things that's just really, really hard to do. I guess I need an iPhone to do a lot in my life for, and there's a lot of plastic in that. So other than that, recycling and there's people who have told us that, you know, the recycling system doesn't really do as much as it was supposed to do. And a lot of other products, you'll hear from the advertising industry, something called greenwashing. Other than being really thoughtful and asking tough questions as consumers and as citizens, the stuff that we absolutely need plastics for, we're going to have to use, at least for the foreseeable future. So instead of what I've learned, the old way of doing things, a linear economy of, you know, pumping oil out of the ground, refining it into plastic pellets. Those pellets by the manufacturing companies are melted and formed into consumer products. We use them, and then we as consumers throw them away, which end up in landfills or poisoning our oceans, or we can recycle them. And then that recycling process might, you know, help to a certain extent. Rather than this linear economy, there's a circular model, which I would highly recommend everybody do some research on. And I think this is where we can go. Other than completely abstaining, the plastics that we, you know, it's going to be really hard not to use for the foreseeable future. Let's do what we can. You know, this economy, and we need federal and state and local policies to help this happen. But a circular rather than linear model just simply looks like this. Stop pumping oil out of the ground, and only, you know, the plastic we need will be used only from recycled plastic. We'll buy it. We will only recycle our plastic. Make sure it's only recycled. And then all that recycled plastic, with a growing recycling, you know, economy, is then just redone. What they do is grind it up into pellets. It's sold down the logistics chain where, you know, other companies, producers, retail companies will melt it down and form it into new products. And there it is. It's circular. I should have given you a little graph, but it's a pretty simple thing, just to make sure all plastic is just, you know, previously used and will be used again ad infinitum. I hope I didn't run through this stuff too quickly, but I'd highly recommend any of these things. Some of these just articles, good books that I've come across, and organizations. We can rely on not just activist organizations like the Sierra Club, the Union of Concerned Scientists, 350.org, and then, you know, the great essays by 350.org people like Naomi Klein and its founder Bill McKibben are, I think, leading the way right now. And with that, let's see. I don't know if I can see everybody. Can you guys see me?
We can see you. If you unshare your screen, maybe we'll all.
Oh, if I can stop the screen share, yes, thank you.
And we're still recording. And if you have a question, I didn't see any in the chat. So I think you should unmute yourself and feel free to ask.
Yeah, please speak up or chat a question, and let's make this interactive. I'd love to hear everyone else's ideas.
I just want to say that there is a conference on recycling plastics and papers I don't know whether you know about that, in October in Chicago, October 20th, I think,
Who is
there's
speaking?
a conference.
Who is
This is
speaking?
Taronet. This is Taronet Firuzi.
Oh, well, you're on the iPhone. All right, thank you.
Yes. So I'm sorry, you said there's a conference coming up locally in this coming October?
Right, it's supposed to have been in Chicago in the year 2020, and they couldn't have it. But now it still is in Chicago in October. I think October 21st or 22nd or 20th and 2 days in October.
And who is doing that?
I don't know the people who are interested in plastic recycling. I really don't know the names.
Okay.
Could
I'm
be the
sure there's
Plastic
publicity
Pollution
for that.
Coalition.
But that,
The
I'm sorry,
Plastic
what?
Pollution Coalition. Do you think that might have been it?
maybe I don't
Plastic
know.
Pollution.
But the name of the conference is Conference on Recycling Plastics and Papers.
Thank
This is
you.
the name of
I
Great.
don't know, maybe that wasn't it.
Thank you. You know,
Yeah,
maybe
I'd like
just
to-
searching by that date, I bet
Yes,
would,
but- right.
well, let's hope the conference
Yeah.
is as big and effective as ever. Just it'll be done virtually, I guess, if we can't all, you know, physically get together for big Chicago conventions of old. Thank you.
Okay. I read somewhere that the Japanese are making an enzyme to break down the plastics. I don't know what kind of enzyme is it. Probably this is one of the subjects that or topics that are going to discuss in that
Mhm.
conference.
Reaction thing.
That would be
Thank you. That's something I only remember seeing a headline of, but never really did a ton of reading on. But a new biological
Enzyme?
process of
Oh, yeah, yeah.
degrading and just, yeah, making the plastic more recyclable, I suppose.
probably or completely destroyed somehow. I don't know.
Mhm.
My son recently purchased some furniture for their yard made out of recycled milk cartons.
Mhm.
And they, so maybe some companies are beginning to understand that you can recycle these things and make them into reusable things that people will do. As you talk about the circular use of plastics, Greg, maybe that will grow. So I'm just happy to hear that they have.
We
done
really
that.
need a circular economy for everything, not just plastics.
Yes.
You know, that's just one area of circular, but I think we have to, your presentation was really good and thorough. You should add Catherine Cahill. She does some YouTubes and she's outstanding.
That's right. I should have. I've seen her. I've seen some,
Yeah.
whether like a TED Talk or something.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yes.
the story of plastics is something else to see. Then you understand what the fossil fuel industry has done to us and why we're in this situation. And they've just built $1 billion plant. And people don't think about, they think about the plastic thing they're using and they shouldn't throw it away till they recycle it, which is really, let's get away from that word. What about the people that live near the plant and their water and their air? And I think that as far as people of faith and this, the theme of this group, we should be looking for some low-hanging fruit of changing habits in our places of worship, not just saying we recycle, because really, as far as plastic goes, less than 9% of every plastic thing that has been made has gotten recycled. Less than 9% ever.
Yes.
And I tried having a building that, well, this is what I would like to see, a building that's plastic, disposable plastic bottle free. They take out nuts, they take out everything. We don't bring plastic into this congregation. And certainly the plastic water bottle is the easiest thing to get away from.
Yes.
You know, start with, they have, that's a good starting place. But I really, and the talking about it. And I want to just, I've probably gone on too long, but I was in a grocery line last week at Whole Foods. The woman had a lot of plastic and I nicely said to her, you know, I'm really trying to reduce, it's Earth Month and I'm trying to think about this. And anyway, we had a little conversation and she finished, and before she left, she said to me, thank you for bringing that up, because I really need to pay attention, and I will.
Good.
So
you.
we have to talk. We have to talk.
That's right. That's how it starts.
That's how it goes.
And acting as a community and maybe a coalition of faith communities across our state would be listened to, right?
Yeah, we gotta start reducing. And you said it, the consumer is the bottom line. If we don't buy it, they won't make it.
That's
Exactly.
right.
For one thing, my experience is I listened to someone very high up, engineer for Chicago water system, and he was producing a lot of information which indicated, anyway, in Chicago, after the water is purified, its constituents are better than water in most plastic bottles. So that's
Oh,
sort of
absolutely.
education will be very important.
That's a
I'll
very
send you my card. I printed cards that 4x6 cards. I handed them out to people help me. I just always have them with me. And if I see someone with a water bottle, I might say, can I give you some information? And I have bullet points, that being one of them.
Oh, we'd love to see it.
And I saw, Carol, did you have your hand up? And we've got about 2 minutes left.
Yeah, I think I'm just really concerned about you. It's almost impossible to buy anything these days without it having plastic, and then you have to take it home and so I think the challenge is, how do we put pressure on, say, Costco or the Jewel grocery store or anybody, even the packaging industry, to modify what they use for things you buy in the grocery store, or things you buy if you go to the hardware store. Everything's in plastic. So it seems to me that there needs to be some pressure put there. But I mean, how am I going to do that as an individual? They're not going to, I don't feel that I have enough power to make a difference with, say, Costco or Jewel or anybody else.
Don't we all feel that way? What difference can one person make? Well,
Right.
we shouldn't stop.
We do all these different things, but still, in spite of that, I have a ton of stuff that has to go out in recycling every single day.
I know. Maybe it's time to get really political, and maybe some laws have to be changed. I don't know.
Where does styrofoam fit in?
Oh, you can't
Styrofoam is
I
all.
have a little card in my purse, well, I did when I could go out, that said, no, don't use plastic straws and no styrofoam. I would give it to restaurants and things like that. And I have a bamboo straw that I keep in my purse and will use if I ever have to do that. There's a place called, what it's called, Greg, Free the Ocean, that
I've heard of that.
sells things that are recyclable. They're not plastic. You might
Right.
want to get made out of bamboo or wood or something of that kind that can be turned into nature.
Straws, cups, something to take a Starbucks.
Yeah, yeah, free the ocean.
Free the oceans. Good point.
I get something from them every single day to answer a quiz, and every time you answer the quiz, they say that they pay to take one plastic thing out of the ocean. Well, that's hardly anything at all, but,
Right.
oh, we only have,
So that would be a great idea to send out to the congregations, sources of reusable things. There's this Grove company, there's something called Thrive, there's a circular thing, and that's a good piece of information.
Greg, let's send out to the member congregations of New Trier Multi-Faith Alliance
Yes.
that information. We'll work it together.
Thank you. Yes.
Andy and Rich, what congregation are you with?
Well, I just said that we're with Rabbi Sirota's congregation, Macomb Hall. We're in Highland Park, so
Oh,
we're not even
wonderful.
listed as a member.
You're not a member, but we know how to reach you.
Yeah. Well, not too far.
That's great. We have to leave the breakout room, I'm afraid now.
It looks
Thank
like
you,
it's
Good to be
everybody.
with
Have
all
a
of you.
good
Yes,
evening.
thank you.
10 seconds.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, everybody. I hope this is the beginning of a conversation.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you,
all.
Greg.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Great day.